What's going on? How's it going, everybody? Full field read. We're back for another edition. It's been a little bit. We had a Broncos draft. I'm Frankie's film. With me, I've got my co-host Robbie Davis. Robbie, how are you doing on this lovely Friday?
I am good. I am good. I'm excited to get into the Broncos draft. We got a lot to go over. How are you, brother?
I am doing fantastic. I am very excited that draft season is kind of not past, but that like we kind of I think we built up so much anticipation for it. I'm glad it's over now and that we just kind of get to have the players we all want to get to watch. I'm excited for the new Broncos just season in general. This built up a lot of excitement for me. See what we're going to kind of get to do with this offense going forward. And I mean, yeah, no, it's been pretty solid. It's starting to warm up a little bit around the world. I had a great time at the draft party, the Let's Talk Broncos draft party. Anyone who ended up going out to that, thank you guys so much. If you didn't make it out, try to make it out next year because it's honestly a really good time. But before we dive into the film, Robbie, what did you think of this draft class overall? Well, give me your draft grade. Blow it up for me.
As far as a grade, I mean, in the scope of the entire league, I'll give it like a pretty favorable grade. Maybe like a B, B minus, maybe even etch it to a B plus a little bit, maybe if not for the later picks. But when you're looking at the scope of the entire league, I'll give it a favorable grade. But when you look at the vibe that the team and Sean Payton gave off all offseason, and then you look at the approach that they took during the draft, it's just really weird. Like, it's not necessarily a bad draft, and I like the players that they ended up picking. It's just that the approach was weird, and it's not what we were expecting, given everything that they've said throughout the offseason. And again, I know that draft season is all about smoke screens. This wasn't a smoke screen situation. The vibe from even before the offseason, from the middle of last year going into the playoffs, was they were going to add certain pieces in certain rooms and they were going to double dip in certain rooms, and they didn't end up doing that. So it was just a really weird approach, but not to say that the players that they selected were bad, because they weren't, because I'm a fan of the players themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think it was a decent floor draft. I think they took a lot of players that were kind of safe in my mind. I think we'll get into them, but the Jahdae Barron pick, you take a sliding player at, a value position, which is either corner or nickel corner in today's league is also so valuable. You get the running back that hopefully can kind of develop into a maybe not 3-down player, but a very versatile option for the Sean Payton offense, who I think fits really well. I think he's probably I don't want to say consensus favorite pick, but the most exciting pick at the very least, because we can kind of so easily visualize how he's going to work out. They ended up getting the Pat Bryant move, which we'll get into. I think you mentioned it before we started, but I've been kind of enjoying him a little bit more as well as I've gotten to know him a little bit more. But then day 3 was also just kind of a lot of the special teams picks for their new special teams coordinator, which, while cool, it is kind of one of those things where, man, I think we were all kind of hoping this offense was going to be able to take a huge leap this year. And not that I don't think it'll be able to, but when you think about, okay, we added Evan Ingram, Trent Sherfield, Pat Bryant, and RJ Harvey, those aren't necessarily the things you look at and you go like, whoa, like they're going to make a jump from like whatever they were, say 20th, 23rd best offense all the way into that top 10. I think it, again, provides a little bit more of a baseline that they'll be able to do more things. But I think I do agree where it's kind of like I think we all kind of wanted to see a lot of help for our, now second year quarterback to be able to make this huge jump. And I don't necessarily know if he's going to be able to do that, especially with the fact that they don't have Cortland Sutton under contract yet, or well, they have him under contract, but they haven't given him his extension yet. I believe we got a report either from him or from Sean like a month ago, him being like, oh, I'll be at voluntary stuff, which gave me the idea like, okay, he's going to be sticking around. But until it happens in today's NFL, until you get paid, usually guys are going to sit out and wait for their money, which I don't even blame Cortland Sutton for at all. He's a guy that obviously had a massive injury earlier in his career. Like, he deserves the chance to get paid when he's got the opportunity to. So there's a lot of kind of a little bit, but also I'm still happy with what they did. Like you said, it was kind of a weird offseason where, once free agency hit, it seemed like a lot of teams just retained their guys. So a lot of the bigger names I think people were hoping for didn't even end up hitting the market. The draft was kind of one of those things where, while there were some moves I would have loved them to make, guys like Colston Loveland, who a lot of people liked, he ended up going 10 overall. There weren't I don't know if I would have preferred Matthew Golden over a Jahdae Barron pick. I don't know if I would have preferred Omari and Hampton, though I'm sure some people will. I'm okay with the route they took, but it's, as you said, not necessarily the most exciting thing. Who would be your favorite pick from this draft class?
My favorite, honestly, if you would have asked me as the draft ended, it probably would have been Jahdae Barron. You know, I really like what he brings to any defense. And again, this is part of the reason why I say my gripes with the draft isn't necessarily the players, because he's a really good player, and he was sliding, and they came up and they took best player available, which they had the luxury of doing so. But he's just a really fun player. You know, he's a Swiss Army knife kind of guy. I think he's best around that line of scrimmage. I think he's going to be like that nickel sub linebacker tweener kind of role. I don't love the idea of him playing outside, but I think he adds a lot to the defense, especially when you think about the guy or the kind of vibes that they brought in during free agency with Hufanga, a guy who has health issues. If Hufanga has to miss any extended time, Barron's the guy who can slide into that same type of architecture and, you know, still produce, maybe not at the same level as Hufanga when he's healthy, but he can raise that floor a little bit for you in that specific area. But now, as I'm watching more, I think my favorite pick is Harvey. I really do. He's a really fun running back, and although, you know, a lot has been made about the running back room, and I'm still not a fan of it, even with the selection of RJ Harvey. But he's a fun player. You know, he's a home run hitter, which is something that I've been screaming from the mountains to the soil that we need a home run hitter at running back. And I know that's a general statement, but we need somebody who can score from anywhere. I know every team would love to have a guy like that, but it's more specific when we're talking about Denver because we haven't had a guy like that in so long. We've had the bruisers, we've had the guys who can get you 5, who can get you 10. We haven't necessarily had the guys who can get you 30 or 25 or 40. And we just got a comment in talking about Harvey's vision. And that is one thing that I promise you Sean Payton fell in love with. I can promise you, watching RJ Harvey's college tape and there's so much similarities in the concepts that he ran in college and that Sean Payton likes to run out of shotgun in the NFL. There's so much similarities. You know it. I'm a big fan of shotgun duo. That gets me going. And there were a lot of reps of RJ Harvey in college doing that. And his reading out the Mike linebacker on that concept, he was really damn good at it. And you mentioned it before we went on air, but his ability to press the gap, but also then get lateral and be explosive while moving laterally, I think there's a lot to be excited for. But I think it also does come with his downsides because, again, a lot has been made about adding to that room. And Sean Payton himself even said, yeah, we're probably going to add multiple bodies to that room in the offseason. And so far, they only ended up adding, you know, of substance, RJ Harvey. And he's not necessarily a 3-down guy. He's a good runner. He's good out of the backfield, but he's not the best blocker. He is not a good blocker. So I don't think that he's going to be a guy who's going to be a 3-down back. And I mean, there is no such thing as a 3-down back in a Sean Payton offense anyway, no matter who they drafted. But I think it's good because you still at least need to have that multiplicity with a 3-down caliber player, even if you're not truly going to use him on all 3 downs. So I think they may run into a little bit of problems in that area, but overall, RJ Harvey is a really fun player. I think he's going to raise that floor of that running game, and hopefully we see it raise the ceiling as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, a few things. Like, as you said, we've talked about it forever. I like Jaleel McLaughlin, but Jaleel's always been a guy that it feels like he can get you a double. He can get you those 15 to 20 yards, but he doesn't have the ability to beat that last tackler, beat that last angle, and take it to the house, you know? I think RJ Harvey offers you that. The pass protection thing I found very funny because I feel like no one cared about the pass protection thing the last couple of years. And we were the only ones being like, dude, Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams are kind of awesome. Like, yes, they might not be doing the stuff we all want, but they're blocking the shit out of dudes. And now everybody's like, they drafted a back who can't pass protect. It's like, yes, that's an issue, but they do still have a guy like Mike Burton on the roster who they've been willing to use in 3rd down situations. While Harvey isn't the best, I do believe most rookie running backs don't come in fantastic pass protectors. I do think there is still a world where he can develop into an adequate pass protector. He shows plenty of physicality. You know, I don't think he won't be willing to kind of lay his pads into people if he needs to, but that is something he definitely needs to improve at. But I mean, I completely agree with every point you made where it's kind of like they finally added fun to this offense and it's something they needed for so long. And the gun duo thing is so funny because like it felt like every rep was either RPO with just, you know, we're getting the duo action or we're just going to straight up motion him into the backfield and just push it straight on their head where I don't know. I am a little bit interested to see. Sean Payton is a guy that likes to let his guys learn the offense a little bit before he gives them full confidence. RJ Harvey has a lot of things in college that he just didn't get the opportunity to do. This is a guy who wasn't running under center. This is a guy who wasn't running a lot of zone concepts. How much is Sean Payton willing to put on his plate early is, I think, a big question, especially with the fact, as you mentioned, they don't really have a lot of guys. Like I just said, he hasn't run a lot of zone stuff. Audric Estime doesn't run zone stuff either. So unless you're going back to the Jaleel workhorse, which maybe they do for a little bit early in the season, but I don't think anyone's going to be too excited about that. Just a lot of question marks, I think, on how this is going to look right away. But hopefully by, week 7, 8, once this thing gets rolling a little bit, they'll be able to kind of have some stuff figured out a little bit. So let's get into the tape a little bit. We're gonna start out with some Jahdae. Oh, that's tall. Let's do that. Jahdae Barron is like a very, very interesting piece to kind of get to add for Vance Joseph. And I do think it's pretty cool that, I don't know if we've seen Sean Payton show this much trust in DC really ever. He is letting, Vance Joseph is driving the bus, it feels like, at sometimes, or when he wants something, when he pounds the table for a guy, they are going to get him. And Jahdae Barron just seems like the most recent example of that. And as you said, man, I mean, his ability to get to play as that nickel, maybe that star linebacker role or that star safety role, kind of as that guy close to the line of scrimmage, can be a huge asset for Denver this year. He is a playmaker when he's that close to the ball. I will say, I don't think he'll be horrible outside. I do want to see him given some opportunities there, because outside of when he has to work on the line of scrimmage against receivers head up, his change of direction ability and his lateral, his ability to break on the ball is ridiculous. I think he's a very underrated mover in this class. I mean, especially plays like this, you kind of see it so much. And he plays the ball really well in the air. I mean, he had great instincts to pick up, I think, 5 interceptions this past season, 7 throughout his career at Texas, where this can be a piece. I mean, we talked about it. We've talked about it a lot. Vance is going to give all of his guys on this defense an opportunity to make a lot of big plays. And I think this is another guy who's just going to help you take the ball away, just like Hufanga and just like Dre Greenlaw. Again, this defense isn't going to be built to hold teams to 0 yards every single game. They might give up a few explosives. That'll probably still happen next season. We saw it happen this last season a little bit, where they might get gashed. But adding guys like this, you're going to create turnovers every single game, and they do not have really an area in the secondary that you can target to take away. Last year was kind of the spine of that defense was a bit of an issue, and then later in the year, outside corner kind of became a little bit of an issue when Riley was banged up a little bit. That's not really a thing anymore. They added 2 great pieces to the spine of their defense. They brought guys back that I think are useful, in PJ Locke and Devon Key, where, yes, you don't want them playing a bunch of snaps, but if you need them to rotate in for a couple plays or something, you're able to do that. And then you get a star piece like this that offers you just so much flexibility, especially when you've got guys like Riley Moss who have dealt with injury, Hufanga's dealt with injuries, Brandon Jones has dealt with injuries. PS2 has missed a game or 2 the past couple of years. I don't think that's really one you got to worry about. But they have enough guys where, hey, one of those 4 guys misses a game, we have another guy that can just slide right in there, because he can kind of do it all for this defense.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of good points. It's really going to be fun seeing where they use him, because it makes sense everywhere. And I hope that they go into the season and they realize this is a guy that we can just plug wherever we need him. If we have a specific package, he could play inside. He could play in that sub linebacker tweener role. We have a package where he needs to play outside. There are so many avenues where he could come on and he could bring value to the defense. And one thing that hasn't been talked about a lot, which I believe, is drafting him has, slightly raised the floor of the run defense for this defense. It was a big point to end the season last year. They got some bigger bodies. They got Dre Greenlaw in the middle. They got Hufanga, who can play that same kind of role as him. But you also add him, and not only are you you're securing the front, but you're also getting run support from depth. And that's so big, especially in the way that defenses want to live in this world in the NFL today. I think raising the floor of the run defense from, a nickel corner and safety kind of tweener guy, I think that means a lot. And I think it could raise a lot of the defense's, aspirations for next season, because if they had anything that was wrong with the defense last year when everyone was healthy, it was that run defense. And I think adding a guy like Barron who can play at that line of scrimmage freely will do a lot for the floor of the run defense.
So I will ask, what do you think about their decision? It seems like they're kind of rolling with a lot of the same. Well, they are rolling with a lot of the same defensive line group. They brought back DJ Jones on a decent contract. They only added Savion Jones, who we'll see where he ends up playing for the defensive line. Do you think that's a good decision? Because in my eyes, it almost feels like they're continuing to zag. They're really just saying like, we don't like. Obviously, they don't want the run defense to be bad. But to me, it almost looks like they're just saying our pass defense is going to be so good and we believe in the progression of our offense that it won't matter too much. And I don't know necessarily if I agree with that because, I think we've talked about enough. God damn it, Vance Joseph, just add a nose tackle to this room and we'll probably be fine. You have the pieces that if you wanted to just like plop big guy in the center, have, DJ Jones, Malcolm Roach, whoever standing next to him, you're probably just a good run defense right there. I'm just curious how you feel about like that kind of decision by the team because I don't hate it, but it's one of those things where I still got to see it.
Yeah, I agree. The only reason I'm not like vehemently against it is because they've added pieces around those guys. They brought in Greenlaw who can play the run. They brought in Hufanga who can play the run from depth. They drafted Barron who could also play the run from depth. They've done enough to mitigate the loss of having that true nose by adding auxiliary pieces around it. So that's not, that's the big reason why I'm not, 100% against it because, I love a good nose tackle. But I think it's okay because, like I said, they've replaced some players with that run defensibility. Full field Reed Darling, Robbie Davis' favorite, Cody Barton, was let go this offseason, and they brought in Jahdae Greenlaw to replace him. Obviously, it's a good move. I think adding that run defense at that position does a lot to, mitigate the absence of, like, the bigger bodies inside.
Yeah. I want to highlight Josh's point here. Everyone should go follow Josh on Twitter. He's been doing a great job with film over the past year or a couple of years. It's been fantastic. I completely agree with this point, and I honestly hope so because they have yes, Jaquan had his issues last year, but McMillan offers you such high highs. Like he really creates so many big plays for this defense that I hope they don't just kind of put him on ice for the entire year. Honestly, it's one of those things where if they can find and if they think Chris Abrams-Drain can play better, because that's what's interesting to me. Like, if they are going to have Barron play as primarily this inside nickel corner role, you're probably going to want another guy that can primarily play outside. Maybe they believe in KD that much, but they have a lot of position groups right now where I'm kind of looking at the numbers and I'm not sure how it's really going to go. Like, they now have a bevy of running backs that I'm not sure if they're only going to roll with 3. They probably wouldn't hate having an extra one. Their tight end room has enough bodies where I don't want them just to let Nate Adkins go because he's probably the best blocker in that room right now. The DB room, they have 6 safeties right now, along with 6 corners. That's going to be an interesting spot. Outside linebacker, another comment from Josh. Savion Jones got added. I don't know necessarily we're going to put them. I agree with him. I really hope they end up playing him at edge more. We all talked about it last year. While Benito and Cooper are fantastic players, they're still 250-pound. They're sub 250 pounds, where if you're facing the Baltimore Ravens, who have 3 offensive tackles that all weigh 360 pounds, you're going to have a bit of a bad time. So I really hope they do exactly what Josh mentioned, where it's just give some early down reps to this 280-pound guy that played edge in college. But I could also see it if they want to end up moving him inside. I think they made a comment about that already, even where I wouldn't be the most excited for it. I think that only gives them more opportunities to get blown off the ball. And it'll be interesting to see because I think he's either a Jordan Jackson or a Dondrea Tillman replacement. And I think Dondrea Tillman is probably the better of those 2 guys. But if they end up saying, hey, we want to have Savion Jones at edge, I also won't be opposed to that. So that'll be an interesting thing to kind of keep an eye on kind of going forward with how they kind of build out the rest of this roster, because they have, again, a lot of options for these low. I think training camp this year is going to be pretty cool. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting camp battles that might not get kind of the shine, but are going to be important for what the season looks like going forward.
100%. I honestly can't wait for camp because not only is it like that on defense, there are some areas on offense that are like that as well. And, every season there's some areas like that. And it's always fun to watch training camp to see how it plays out because you get the live tweets of all the position battles. It's just really fun.
Lucas Kroll's going to be the best player on the team again.
Oh, yeah. Of course he is.
Let's get into RJ Harvey. Very exciting player. Before we get into him, It's been so hard for me to think of like a true comp for RJ Harvey. I don't really know. Like comps aren't necessarily the most important thing in the world. What do you see his like, not necessarily as a player, what do you see his ceiling as in this offense?
It's tough. It really is tough because he's a smaller back that plays outside of his frame. He does not play like the 5'8", 5'9" guy that he is at all. He plays way above that. So it really is tough because, again, there is the lack of pass protection. A lot of people say that he's the Bucky Irving of this draft. And honestly, if we're doing like a comp or not necessarily a one-to-one, but if we're talking about a specific role in an offense, I wouldn't hate that. I wouldn't hate to see, RJ Harvey turn into the Bucky Irving of Sean Payton's offense. That's not something that I would hate.
Yeah. No, and I mean, as I have these highlights going right here, this is such an aesthetically pleasing running back to get to watch. I don't think Denver's really had a runner like this in a very long time. Like, I always really enjoyed watching Phillip Lindsay between the tackles because he was really good at these slalom type runs. Harvey's lateral explosiveness is just ridiculous. His jump cuts between gaps are crazy. And as you mentioned already, he is so good at manipulating the angles of defenders, forcing them to get closer to the line of scrimmage, and then just exploding 5 yards to his right. And he's great at beating angles. He's also one of those guys that it feels like when he's changing direction, he does not lose any speed or any momentum. He is a guy that if you need to cut, spin, he's so creative with his damn footwork. Like, he is just a very exciting player. And one thing that's really underrated about him, yes, I think a lot of people kind of mischaracterize him. He is one of these, shorter, more explosive speed backs, but he's still pretty compact as a runner, and he is tough to bring down. Like, arm tackles do not bring this guy down in the slightest. And as I said, with his footwork and his balance, like, there are some plays, I think I have one in here where he's putting his hand in the dirt and keeping himself up. He's spinning out of tackles. He's one of those guys that there will probably be a run this year that looks like it'll be a loss of 5, and then he ends up picking up 2, and we're highlighting on here being like, this was one of the craziest plays of the game because he just has a ton of that ability where he can turn something around so quickly, even if guys get in the backfield. He makes their defenders truly look silly with some of the cuts he makes. And then you bring in the actual pass game stuff he can do. They have not had a guy that can run an expanded route tree out of the backfield. And at least when I got to see Harvey down at the Senior Bowl, he can do that. He can be the guy to run these choice routes out of the backfield. He can be the guy to just take an angle route for you. You want to put him on a rail route, he'll be able to beat a linebacker off the line of scrimmage, beat a linebacker off. There's just a lot of exciting stuff that he can kind of add to this offense that they just have not had and that are such core concepts for what Sean Payton wants to do. And, I mean, as we kept saying, this is a true home run hitter, even though he doesn't get away from this last tackler right here. His ability to beat angles is, again, something they just have not had in a very long time. And it's so exciting that they get to have that this year and for the next few years going forward. Random question. You might not know the answer to this. This is me point. Do you know what his injuries were in college? Didn't he have an injury or two?
I do not.
Okay, cool. Forget I mentioned that at all. Men in Black, flash pointer, everybody. But yeah, his ability to kind of stop within gaps, break runs outside. I think his vision is really good. Like, you can have him running a lot of this, a lot of gap stuff and a lot of just straight up duo stuff. And he sees the lanes very well. And as I said, he's so good at forcing linebackers, safeties into bad angles and just pushing that advantage, straight to the end zone. So I can't wait to see how he kind of impacts this run game because they need a guy like this so desperately. And hopefully, if they can have a guy like Audric Estime maybe be a bit more of the finisher for this team, if that can kind of be the role he kind of develops into, I can see the vision of the combo. I can see it, but I need to see it, because last year, Audric Estime, he had a carry or two where you were like, okay, maybe, but man, the explosiveness before the line of scrimmage and the explosiveness after the line of scrimmage was just not consistently there. And I hope this team actually leans into more gap stuff this season. I think that this kind of points to them doing so, but until it happens, I'm still sitting here like, Sean, you were kind of just running zone way more than I anticipated you to all season long. Right now, you don't have a lot of backs that are experienced running zone besides Jaleel McLaughlin. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how the running game plays out. But no, this is just such a fun player. And here's an angle right here where like this Iowa State safety also takes a horrendous angle, or just isn't that fast overall. But having a guy like this that can just make these touchdowns appear out of thin air is going to be very exciting for the Broncos offense that has linemen that they will give you a crease in the running game. Seeing Ben Powers or Quinn Miners pull around, knock a guy a gap to the left, and then we've got this guy just shooting through that gap is going to be, beautiful. Going to be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and it does a lot for the room schematically because they finally have a guy who gives you that multiplicity when you're creating an offense, when you're creating a rushing attack. We talked about how he can take these runs from the shotgun. He can run the inside zone from the shotgun. He can do the duo. He can do the outside the tackles. He's a good lateral runner. There's a lot of things that he can do well. We noted how there's the lack of the under center runs, but even when you're looking at Denver's depth chart running back wise, you have Estime, who is a between the tackles guy. He's not going to be outside the tackles. You're not getting him outside the tight end, outside the C gap, D gap. You're just not getting that. He's not that kind of player. He doesn't excel that way. And then you have Jaleel McLaughlin, who's behind him, who can only do that. And, he's not necessarily the best between the tackles runner. So they have a bunch of these guys who can do specific things, but you also have a play caller who is, to a certain extent, he's fitting round pegs into square holes with the rushing attack that he has. Like last season, I agree with you. I was talking about it all last season. We were talking about it every episode on Full Field Read, where they should have leaned into more gap because of what they had, but they just ended up not doing that. And a lot of that is because of the play action game that's tied to the zone runs. But at some point, something's got to give. But now they have a guy who can give you that multiplicity when you're creating that rushing attack. The only thing that's a knock on it, though, is he's not the 3-down player that you would wish when you're creating that rushing attack. Because although he can do both, there are going to be situations where he has to come off the field for a guy who can't do both of those kinds of runs. They can only do between the tackles, or they can only do outside of the tackles. So that gives you some issues as well, which is why I really would have liked to see them double dip into that room this offseason, whether it be by free agency or the draft. But overall, he really is a fun player, and that's all we needed. That's really all. As a fan, all I want is to watch fun football players. I don't care how you get there. That's why I did not care, even though it didn't work out, I did not care that they traded up in the second round to draft Javonte a few years back, because I want to watch fun football players, and it looks like we've got one.
And something I want to say too, and this kind of works out for both Harvey and Pat Bryant, I think this might be an avenue, at least early in the season, where they can lean into their RPO game a little bit more, because that, as you said, that was something Harvey was doing seemingly every other play. Pat Bryant's QB play wasn't fantastic either, so they were doing a lot of Illinois as well. I actually didn't hate the Illinois offense. I will say that. Anyone knows me, I don't like a lot of college football schemes, but Illinois, I was like, I can do this. You guys are actually running some under center stuff. I saw them run some pro concepts in the passing game, and I was like, all right, I can live with this a little bit. Quarterback play was not fun to watch, though. But yeah, I cannot agree anymore, where it's just like, dude, they needed a player like this for so long. And here's your examples too. I don't know if we mentioned it. His contact balance is ridiculous. Like, he is truly a guy that is not afraid of contact. He is willing to lay his shoulder into somebody if he needs to. And when you've got a 200-pound, bowling ball flying at you at 22 miles per hour, he's going to land an impact. It's not just going to be a small hit whatsoever. So I think that the sky is really the limit for what he can do in the offense. It's just kind of how quickly can we get him to that position. Here's a little spin move. His creativeness as a runner too is just so fun. I mean, he really pulls out every single move in the book. And again, Denver's kind of just had guys the past few years that are just going to run through your face, which is okay, but this is a little bit more fun, a little bit more flashy, I think. So let me get into the last RJ Harvey clip. This is the one where he just absolutely destroys the safety. And this is what we're talking about. It's like, man, it's hard to get lower on a guy who's already like 5'7", 5'8", and then you get into the fact that he's moving quickly and is willing to lay a shoulder into you. We're going to see some guys put into the ground.
He plays way outside of his frame. Mm-hmm. And that was the most shocking thing to me when I turned on his tape.
Yeah, no, and he is a hassle to bring down in the open field. So I think that pretty much sums up him. Let's get into some Pat Bryant stuff. Where do you see Pat Bryant fitting best in this receiver room? Like, where do you think he lines up the most next year?
It's tough, but I think majority we see him inside. I genuinely do. And I think that's probably where he's best. And I'm sure everyone saw the soundbite of Sean Payton saying that he saw a lot of Michael Thomas in him. And to an extent, I agree with him. Now, I don't think that's, a 1-to-1. I don't think it's a player comp, but I think when you're talking about schematically, when you have a guy inside who can, work those underneath inside routes, yes, that reminds him a lot of Michael Thomas. And it reminded me a lot of Michael Thomas as well. But one area that really stood out to me that reminded me of him when I watched him is his hands. He's got a very big catch radius, but he does not drop many passes. He's got very big hands. It doesn't matter if there's a guy draped all over him. He's bringing the ball down. And that's super quarterback friendly, which is the biggest thing, I'm sure, when they were looking into wide receivers this draft class, was being quarterback friendly. So I think when you combine all of those things, it makes most sense for him to play inside more than outside, just because his bread and butter is the inside. That underneath short route running, the play after the catch inside, I think that's mostly where he's going to play.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It'll be interesting to see because, they kind of have – Mims had a lot of production last year out of the slot. Evan Ingram, I think we all think is going to get a lot of those opportunities to get moved out into the big slot role. I think that this is kind of a sign that they want to have Valet prioritize more outside stuff, but even he was a guy that got big slot opportunities. So they kind of have 4 guys that can rotate into that role. But I completely agree with everything you said, where it's like, man, this guy has such strong hands. He's a willing blocker. I think, like you said, he's great at helping out his QB, both at the catch point. He also works back to the football well, and when a play breaks down, knows what to do again. This Illinois quarterback wasn't always doing the most favors. So even on plays where, hey, I'm open in the progression, but my guy hasn't gotten to me yet, let me maybe gear down a step or two. I can now stay in this window for a second longer. Okay, now I found the pass. I think he is going to be a guy that can actually help Bo Nix along quite a bit. I thought he was a better separator, at least at the line of scrimmage, than I expected. One thing that I think was really impressive when I was going through his tape, at least in the Rutgers game, he is very tough to press, which is something that this team has kind of struggled with the past couple of years. They just haven't had a lot of guys that can win directly off the line of scrimmage. I think we see it a lot when they get into these third and short situations, as we harped on so much last year where, we need a guy who can just win on a quick one-step slant because they are just crowding the A gap or the B gaps. Okay, now I think they have a guy that can actually do that, be a little bit tougher at the catch point. I think something else that kind of speaks to him probably playing more inside. While he is a nuanced route runner, and I think he is fairly shifty, he's not obviously super explosive out of his cuts, but he knows how to out leverage DBs and kind of get them on their back foot before breaking one way or the other. I think he kind of doesn't have I got the step on this guy. Now with my speed, I can turn that 1 step into 2 steps, 3 steps. That sounds like I'm doing a Dr. Seuss thing. He doesn't necessarily have that explosiveness to kind of say, not only am I open, I'm now very open. That is a little bit of something where you don't necessarily want a guy like that outside. He's not going to be, blowing the doors off of anybody. But the combination of traits he does have, combined with the fact that I think this receiver room has so many interchangeable parts, which will be very fun. You put a bunch stack out there with Evan Ingram, this guy, and either Valet or Sutton. That's a lot of size for teams to have to deal with, and that's also a lot of versatility in what they can do. He brings you a little bit in the screen game as well, not obviously a ton, but enough where you're not saying, okay, the only option we have in the quick wide receiver screen game is Marvin Mims. I do think there will be times this year where they do get more Pat Bryant the ball in space because he's not the most explosive guy after the catch, but he is tough to bring down. He's a bigger body at 205, 6'2", and he's willing to kind of use his stiff arm a little bit to create himself some space, as we'll kind of see a lot throughout some of these clips. But I completely agree where this is a guy who I think can be very useful as far as playing that inside role and just kind of creating space.
Yeah, for sure. And one area that I don't think is talked about enough, and, I don't think he's world renowned in this area, but when he plays close to that line of scrimmage, he's a very willing blocker. He's not going to come in and be a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown or Alan Lazard, but he gets in there. And a lot of the times wide receiver coaches, they'll tell you, you don't have to be a tight end out there playing. All you got to do is just get in somebody's way. And he does more than that. So I think also drafting a guy like him can also help that running back room and help that rushing game, as well as just all the things that you highlighted about him playing inside and possibly even playing a little bit outside. But that's one thing. That's one area of his game that he didn't necessarily get a lot of credit for, was the fact that he is a willing blocker when he's played at that line of scrimmage. And one point that you brought up that I loved, that jumped out of the screen at me when I was watching his tape, is the fact that he's always coming back to the ball. And we know how much Sean Payton likes to call those static hitch routes 5-10 yards down the field. It was a lot last year, and he's a guy who's always going to come back to the ball and help his quarterback out. And another area that you also brought up that we talked so much about last year is those one-step slants. They didn't have a guy who could, who could do them at all. They tried with Sutton so many times. It just did not happen because that's not his game. He's not a contested catch maker on the inside, 0 to 5 yards from the line of scrimmage. Obviously, Sutton is a contested catch player down the field, but in that specific area of the field, that's not his game. They finally have somebody who can do that and that can open up that avenue of the passing game. And thank God, because the past 2 years, every single time they've tried to do it, hasn't worked. So I think it's a really fun, addition to the team. It just shocked me a little bit because when you think about adding a wide receiver to this team, I initially thought it was going to be a guy who was just like super dynamic. And obviously those guys are going to go at the top of the draft. I'm not saying they should have just selected one at 20, but I would have loved if they would have at least double dipped on a guy who could give you that after the catch ability. Not to say that Pat Bryant can't, but the best parts of his game are outside of that. They don't necessarily have a guy who can take a catch and run 10 yards. They have that in Marvin Mims, but his role is a little bit limited, especially when they carved out that new role for him in the backfield. They brought in Evan Ingram, but he's also limited because of how many places he lines up and doesn't line up. So I would have loved to see a guy like that. But overall, Pat Bryant is a really fun player, like we talked about with RJ Harvey. And I think it's pretty much seamless to see where he's going to fit in next season with this offense and with Bo Nix.
Yeah, I completely agree. There are a few reps on it. Like here, they're running dagger, which, like, again, you see him running the dig on this. He's able to make some plays after the catch. I believe this is the game winner against Rutgers as well, where there was a lot of stuff when I was watching. I was like, oh, you can just copy paste this right into what they're doing, and I think they'll be fine. I do agree that I thought it was very interesting that they didn't add more of an outside piece. I think that's kind of a little bit of the area where they're lacking, but at least from what we've heard kind of from media, I know Albright said this a lot, like, they believe that Devon Villay can kind of be that next outside weapon for them. We'll see. I like Devon Villay a lot. I don't know if he's the heir apparent to Cortland Sutton by any means. But as you said, they kind of went for, I think, more of the physical big body option, and they already had a few of those guys. So we'll see how that kind of gets to work out for them. But man, one thing that was just so stand out to me is, I mean, his ability to put up stats and kind of monster stats in some of these games with some of the QB play he was getting. I mean, this play was a really brutal example where it's like he does such a good job getting this DB turned around. He's wide open on the post route down the field. This quarterback is throwing from the flattest base you're ever going to see in your life. Like, there should be no way this is incomplete, and we missed him by about 5 yards. Like, there's a few of those on every single game you see, and I mean, he comes back out every game. He's never hanging his head at all. He's never pulling, maybe a Jerry Jeudy. No slander at Jerry Jeudy because he completely deserved to throw those head nods at people, but this is another one right here where he's just able to get himself so wide open. We've just got an absolute missed throw. This is a guy that, as you said, I think when you give him actual good quarterback play and consistent stuff, I think we might even see better stuff than we saw out of him in college. I think the additions of both him and RJ Harvey kind of bring the opportunity for this offense to be a lot better on third and shorts and also in the red zone. That's kind of an area where they were good later in the year last year, but hopefully with the addition of these guys that just kind of make you more multiple. As we said, I think you can line up a lot of these guys all over the football field. You don't have to pigeonhole any of these guys into one scenario. I think you can have RJ Harvey move outside a little bit. I think there are going to be times where you have RJ Harvey and Marvin Mims in the backfield together. I think there's going to be times where, you're maybe moving Pat Bryant into kind of that H-back spot and you're having him more insert block. There's a lot of things they can do to kind of disguise a lot of what they want to pull off. And I think these guys only help out with stuff like that, especially with the fact that they are a little bit older and hopefully are going to be guys that Sean trusts early on in his offensive scheme. Here, let me pull up some of the Purdue clips as well. Do you have any thoughts on the later round guys? Any of those guys? Any Savion Jones? Any K. Robinson? Jeremy Crawshaw thoughts? I'll share some Jeremy Crawshaw thoughts with you.
I mean, I really don't. other than the fact that that was what surprised me most about the draft. And that's what, I had a lot of, I mean, I don't want to say strong feelings because it's going to sound like I hated the draft when I didn't. I actually really liked the players that they picked. But a lot of my gripes with the draft came with that because this draft should have, and to a certain extent, was packaged as the Bo Nix draft. And obviously, every single pick wasn't going to be offense, but you have a guy who's coming off of a good rookie year. He's going into his second year. You only have 1 or 2 more years until that option hits. You need a full evaluation. And I don't want to get onto a rant because I've talked about it so many times, but it's so important to nail a quarterback's development this early because these are the years where he's molded to the NFL. These are the years where you can surround him with a ton of talent because he's on that rookie contract and you can afford to surround him with all this talent. The one single area of quarterback development that I personally just like loathe. And again, this is me looking from the outside in. The one area of quarterback development that I absolutely loathe is a guy comes out, he plays well in his rookie year, but you need weapons around him. The guys you have around him in that rookie year are okay, but they're not good enough to simply elevate him on their own. And then that team goes out the next offseason and comes out and says, well, we trust our guys. We trust the development of our guys. We trust our coaching staff to bring these guys along. And that's fine. You can trust development as much as you want because that's a core part of football and team building, but it's intangible. You can't see that until it's developed on the field. You can't know what a player is bringing to you until he develops. And you can have a bunch of guys, like we can use Denver as an example because this is one of the examples that I thought of. I just hate the approach that they took because you have Troy Franklin, who I don't love. I don't think there's a lot that you can just look at Troy Franklin and say that he's great at. Yet, again, he was a rookie. He can develop into that. But you have a guy like Devon Villay, who I said last year he was a 7th-round draft pick, and I said that he was going to be the X factor for the offense preseason last year. I love Devon Villay, but I don't think that he is there yet at being a core piece of a passing offense. And you have all of these guys that you're praying for development, but you're also doing it at the expense of a second-year quarterback where development is the most important at this time. So, I mean, my approach, if it were me, is to just surround the living hell out of Nix with just talent. I don't want to say his name. It's like the Grim Reaper around here. But the way that Elway approached the draft the year after Drew Lock had those 7 okay games was just perfect. It may not have panned out because Drew Lock sucked and some of the players that they drafted weren't also that good. But the approach that Elway took was perfect. It was seamless. They got a guy who they said, okay, there's a lot that we can build on here. So let's surround the living hell out of him with talent. And although, again, it didn't work, the approach was good. Process over results. I don't love the approach that they took this season with just trusting their development because you can trust development all you want. If the guys aren't good, they're just not good. And I'm not saying that's the case with Troy Franklin. I'm not saying that's the case with Devon Villay, but that's a possibility. It's a very big possibility. And that's the biggest gripe I have with it. Not to go on a tangent, but that gets me going.
And I almost want to say, too, your point about the Drew Lock thing, I think there's an argument to be made that it did work. The entire point is we need to see, as I love what Bo did last year, but I don't think anyone is sitting here being like, Bo Nix is a definitive top 12 quarterback, and he needs to, he needs to take another step before we're able to be like, this is the guy for the next decade. I think we're all very hopeful. I'm very hopeful, but there is the world where it's like, oh, man, teams figure him out a little bit more now that they've got game tape on him. Maybe we don't see a step forward from the receiver room. And then the excuse is, oh, the receivers weren't that good. Like, no, man, they need to have as much of good tape with surrounding good talent to know what is the ceiling of this guy so we can properly build around him. And I do think there is a world where they're saying after the season, like, oh, man, we just didn't do enough to surround him with talent. And then we're going into year 3 being like, okay, like, is this guy truly the future of the team? And again, that's not me trying to bash on him at all. that's just kind of the name of the game, especially in the current AFC. You need to have a guy that is a bona fide, like, sadly, damn near elite quarterback. And if he's not elite, he needs to be very good, at least in your scheme. If this year they're blaming a lot of the scheme problems on, well, we just didn't have the right pieces, well, then shit, man, we're going into year 3 and we're still not super certain we have a guy that can kind of carry this team deep into a playoff run. Because while he was pretty good down the stretch last season, well, I think he had an all right playoff game, even though the stats wouldn't reflect that because there were just so many things going awry in that Buffalo game. There is a like I said, there is a world where they're kind of coming out of the season saying we wish we would have done more, and that's not always the place you want to be. But next year, with the fact that the Russell Wilson money will be off the books, I'm, again, maybe the cap takes another decent jump, which it seems like it does every single year. They're like, oh my God, we have an extra $8 million. It's like, I feel like at this point, just expect that. They can hopefully add one of these big weapons, but now you already have kind of so many young pieces. I don't want to say in the way, but taking up a lot of these spots, I don't even know if say a guy became available. I mean, we saw it this offseason with guys like, was it Ayuk who got traded? Whoever the guy who got traded to the 49ers is, DK ended up getting moved. With how the current room is right now, if one of those guys became available like during the season, not obviously those specific guys, but say a big name becomes available, sadly, there might be a world where Sean just says, well, I already have 5 guys. What are you talking about? I've already got my Sutton, Mims, Valet, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin going forward. And I'll be sitting there like, huh? Like, are you sure? But I mean, if that's kind of the way he wants to go, that's how it's been built so far. I wanted to highlight this last rep because this is kind of what we're talking about when we're like, this guy can create separation in a phone booth. I just want to give one more little Pat Bryant look. Boop. Yeah. So I'm a little hesitant. I can't lie. I'm excited to see what it can be. I'm a little sad that so many of their day 3 picks, I feel like they're not necessarily things that I think help the ceiling of this team too much. And we were talking about before the show, I'm a little sad that last year I think we saw one of the better special teams units we've seen from Denver in a very long time. They were phenomenal on punt team, at least. It was one of my favorite things to get to watch every single week. And they replaced a lot of those guys. I'm not saying that's a bad move. You bring in a new special teams coordinator. Obviously, he's going to want to bring in some of his own people. But, man, when you are burning however many draft picks, I think they probably burned 3 on guys that, like, we'll see with K. Robinson. I know there's people that kind of believe in his development as a potential pass rusher in the future. They've said the same thing about a lot of guys over the past few years. Like, I think it was, who was it? It was like John Allen, or Chris Allen or something, who was the Alabama pass rusher from a couple of years ago. That was like, oh, maybe this can be a guy. I'll be honest, man. I'll be pretty shocked if K. Robinson is getting pass rush snaps this year. They just have a lot of guys already at that position. Unless there's injuries and they need to give him some snaps, I don't know if I see it. And they already had kind of guys that I think are decent enough on special teams where it's like, oh, man, are you really trying to burn a 4th-round pick on this? I do love the Crawshaw pick. I was watching Crawshaw at the Senior Bowl. He was very fun. And they needed a decent punter. I actually had a good time going through his tape as well, as apparently a lot of people enjoyed. One of my most liked cut-ups. God damn it, people. I put in hours into like these Broncos players. Stuff. We're looking at punter highlights. Whatever. I'll deal with it. Crawshaw, I think, will be a little bit of fun, but I can't lie. There's part of me that's looking at some of their day 3 picks, and this is going to be super, hindsight is 2020, probably too Madden for everybody. But like, man, I wouldn't have hated just throwing some developmental picks at the offensive line, which is an area you want to keep strong. Maybe take another shot at an explosive weapon late in the draft. There were running backs like late into day 3 that I think would have been functional, Again, maybe they do have a lot of belief in these guys, but none of these guys are proven. Even Harvey, who I'm very excited about, like, this is a guy who hasn't played in the NFL yet. If you're thinking he's going to be your feature back and it doesn't work out, well, now you're back to where you were last year, where you're having Estime, Jaleel, Tyler Bidet, Blake Watson kind of rotate carries. And I think we know how that went. I'm not saying those guys can't improve. I'm not saying there's no world where they become better players, but it's a little bit tough for me to kind of look at the way they kind of constructed some of the things that they needed to improve upon. And as you said, they talked at length about improving upon, and they didn't necessarily improve too much. But of course, there is always the chance that in 2 days they end up signing. So let me just throw a hypothetical at you. Say in a few days they sign J.K. Dobbins. How would that be something that you're like, all right, cool, now I feel like solidified about this room? Or like, is there a move that you think you'd be like, all right, now I'm all right with this?
It's tough because a lot of those names are gone. Like, They came and went in free agency. And like you said, a lot of teams retained their guys. So, I mean, in a nutshell, if they came out and signed an established running back like J.K. Dobbins, even if it's not exactly J.K. Dobbins, I'd feel a lot better about the running back room because at least you have some resemblance of an actual running back room. You don't have a guy in Estime who showed, minimal things to be excited for in his limited snaps last year. You don't have Jalen McLaughlin, who was fun and somewhat explosive in his areas, but there are also areas where he's lacking in. You don't have, a lot of guys who are just solidified. So if they went out and they signed a guy like J.K. Dobbins, I'd feel a lot better about the room. Honestly, there are a lot of rumors about Nick Chubb. We'll see how he comes back from injury. I don't know about that one. I mean, I would have. This is me just playing Madden franchise, but I would have seen if they kicked the tires on Breece Hall, a guy like that. I would have loved that for the running back room, and at least if it's not Breece Hall exactly, a guy like him you can bring into the running back room. In the same sort of reasons like J.K. Dobbins, you can bring in an established guy and have a resemblance of some sort of actual running back room. But I mean, it leaves a lot to be desired, this running back room, especially the way it was propped up all offseason, the way they said that they were going to double dip at the room and just didn't. So it just leaves a lot to be desired. But there is a fun player there now, at the very least.
They're bringing back Samaje Perine, baby, and then everything's going to go.
I fucking love it.
Like, it's so funny. I'm looking at the Javonte contract for 1 year, $3 million, and I'm like,
I would have done that easily.
Maybe, right, $3 million, minimal investment on a guy that's like, all right, he at least knows the offense, and Samaje signed with the Bengals. Good for the Bengals. Good for Samaje Perine.
Good for Samaje. He's back. He's home.
He's back. We all like Samaje Perine, except for a lot of people, but we like Samaje Perine in this stream. If you're watching, you like Samaje Perine too. But it'll be fun to get to watch this season. I hope there are still a few veteran additions. I know there's been talk of maybe they make a move to go, not, talk like by any big media people, but I know we've been hopeful that like a Tyler Algier maybe just way to Denver for an extra pick. Supposedly they're going to be getting a few comp picks for next season with the fact that they lost 4 players that got signed to contracts and signed 2. So if they want to take one of that was the other thing. And I was glad they did it, but I wasn't too happy with how they did it. They had so many picks this year that I enjoyed them doing the thing. And I guess I have 2 more questions I'll throw at you. So what was it? They moved down in the second round. Was it twice? And then they moved up from the third and fourth. How'd you feel about that? Do you think that was the right decision? Or do you think they should have sat, I don't know, even know who went between those picks and tried to get maybe a slightly higher value player than Harvey?
I don't really know either. I got to see who went before and after those picks. But in a vacuum watching it, it was just kind of like, all right, man, you kind of want to just hurry up and stay here and pick a valuable player. Because while they are in a place depth chart wise where they can go best player available, there are some physical needs on the team. I don't think that just like playing chess with the board was the greatest idea. Maybe it worked out for them. They ended up getting a guy that they liked in RJ Harvey. So we'll see. But I mean, all right, this is the one area where I will give people this. There are some times where Sean Payton acts as if, in press conferences or whatever, there are some times where a lot of fans think he acts as if he's the smartest guy in the room. And this is the one time I will give them that. I'll give them that.
Oh, 100%. Oh my God. Yeah, he's the cockiest guy in the league. Part of it I love, but no, I completely agree with that, dude. There is no shot Sean Payton isn't Vance Joseph walked up and was like, hey man, we've got pick 20. You could get a star level running back in Omarion Hampton, but hear me out. We've already got Audric Estime, and you know how much you like him. Let me get a corner. And he was like, fuck it. I can do that. I can make this work. 100%. No, I completely agree with what you're saying. We got people saying the trades are pointless. I didn't personally hate it. I just wish maybe at least the 4th round pick that they ended up moving up to get Savion would have been maybe a different player, and I'll probably end up eating those words if he ends up being a productive player that I enjoy this season. But at least looking at it between 51 and 60, the only guy I can see that I would have been like, oh man, Trey Harris is maybe an option or Jack Besh, but I think I like I did like Besh, but they also needed a running back, so I don't even know if they were looking at Besh and Harvey if they would have ended up going the other option there, especially with the fact that they ended up getting a guy like Pat Bryant later who probably plays a little bit of a similar role. But yeah, I thought it was interesting because I just would have enjoyed them more so like be aggressive with it. You know, maybe that's a little bit silly. Again, the draft this year wasn't necessarily full of highlight players, but let's take some picks, combine them, and move up. Especially when you look at the fact it's like, man, you didn't really use the late round picks on anything too crazy. You know, the 7th round tight end they got, cool, but he's also a 7th round tight end who like had 4 catches, I think, in his career. Yeah, maybe he becomes the developmental project that we all fall in love with. But if you could have combined that and maybe go get an extra 5th, maybe, you know, you take a extra pick from last year, you move back up into the 2nd, you're able to get another like highlight player for this offense. I would have personally been a little bit more excited for that, I think. But, you know, what happened. Hindsight is 2020. I had one more thing I was going to ask. This is again, Rand, you might have absolutely no idea. The AFC West rivals, we had the Chargers, Raiders, and the Chiefs. Any of their drafts who's the scariest out of all their drafts, if you remember any of their players?
Honestly, I liked the Raiders. I really liked the Raiders. I did. You know, they got GNT. My favorite pick of like the entire AFC West was Jack Besh to the Raiders. It really was. He was one of my favorite players, period, in the entire draft. Just, I love those types of players. And the Puka Nacua comp to him was so good because although they might play differently, they are structured in the same way within an offense. And like you said, him and Pat Bryant were very similar players and very similar like schematically, they're very similar, but he would have been such a nice receiver. He's like the quintessential Sean Payton wide receiver. He really is. So yeah, I really liked the Raiders. I really like the direction the Raiders are going, period, even before the draft, and we'll see after. But yeah, I think probably the Raiders are probably the scariest.
They keep making it so hard for me to dislike them. Like,
Yeah.
I like Pete Carroll a lot. I like Geno Smith a lot. They added a running back that's obviously like one of the more entertaining college football players probably the last few years. As you said, they got Besh. Jesus Christ, I'm blanking on the others. Not Jacoby. Who's the other receiver? Jacoby Myers? Jacoby Myers always ends up cooking their team. Brock Bowers is awesome. I like Michael Mayer. They drafted 2 offensive tackles that are just like big bodies in Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant that are kind of developmental options, but I like those guys too. Darian Porter was one of my favorite sleeper corners in this draft just because he is such a Pete Carroll corner. This guy's like 6'3" with like 34-inch arms and has great ball skills. Like, they keep adding pieces that I'm like, damn it, I want to dislike you so much, but I'm kind of rooting for you a little bit underneath because I don't want to see a lot of these guys fail. The Chargers also had a draft that I thought was decent. I saw them catching a little bit of flack for it, but they got a lot of players that I ended up liking. They got Omarion Hampton, they got Trey Harris, and they got Jamari Caldwell. All those are really solid picks. We'll see if any of their later picks ended up working out for them. But those are 3 players I think that kind of like Omarion Hampton playing for Greg Roman and Harbaugh is terrifying a little bit. Like, that is really a guy that could just be like, I don't know, a key cog in their offense for the next like decade because he's just such a perfect like hand in glove fit right there. But yeah, no, I think honestly a lot of the AFC West got better. Even the Chiefs, sadly, getting Josh Simmons at 32 was a good pick. And this is such a random thing. Did you see that Vic got another linebacker? Vic got
I did. Good for our guy.
It warmed my heart. I was like, nice. I was like, hell yeah, Vic. Like, he's like, you know what? I got one more in me. Let me go get this star line. Like, Gia Campbell's a great prospect. He's going to be an incredible player in the defense for Vic Fangio. I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, they already have 2 guys. I don't give a shit. Vic Fangio can do whatever the hell he wants, and their defense was incredible down the stretch next season. It's kind of like Denver. There's nothing wrong with building more onto a strength, man. Like, it's going to make it hard. It's not like they are really like desperate in any areas of their offense that they couldn't make a move like that. And again, you have one of the best linebacker evaluators and developers in the league now working with what many considered to be like a star, if not superstar level linebacker prospect. That seeing that, it warmed my heart a little bit, where I was like, I know Vic like probably put a little heart on the draft card. I get to do this again. I'm excited to get to see what he can kind of get to do with that group. But and any final thoughts on the Broncos draft class?
Nah, I mean, not necessarily. I just it's hard until we actually see it on the field. But one thing that I will say about the draft class, and I talked about this a lot last year actually. A lot has been made about Sean Payton and where he took these guys, where they were on the big boards and if they reached for a lot of these guys. I don't give a shit about if a guy reaches. I don't care if, he takes them early, he takes them late. I don't care. If you love a guy, go out and get him. Just go out and get him. He did it last year with Knicks. He caught so much flack for that. And now Broncos country is in a very good place as a fan base because of it. So I'm not saying just because it worked that time that it'll always work, but I don't think any drafter, any NFL coach should give a shit about where Twitter thinks prospects should go versus where they went. I don't think they should.
I mean, it's so funny. Like, after week 2 of next season, there will be a huge ESPN, NFL, Bleach, whoever article that's, a redraft of the 2025 NFL draft.
Exactly.
Last year, it had like Bo Nix going 3 overall after 6 weeks because, oh shit, we've got a potential franchise quarterback, at least more so than we thought before he got drafted. Like, that could easily happen this season if we watch RJ Harvey have a 150-yard all-purpose game in week 2, and all of a sudden everybody's like, you see what RJ Harvey did? That guy might have been a star player that everybody let slip down their board. No one really knows anything until the actual football gets played on the field. But, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Really excited to get more into the season with everybody. I think, we're going to get to have such a good time once the preseason gets started up here, seeing a lot of the training camp stuff and just seeing how a lot of these battles work out. The 53-man roster is going to be a bloodbath, I think, at the bottom half. Like, there's going to be a lot of churn, I think, just trying to find the right guys to fill out depth on this team. But yeah, tag your stuff, Robbie.
Robbie Davis, you can find my stuff over at Robby NFL. You can find Full Field Read every Friday, especially during the season, over on the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube channel. And I just remembered we didn't have a show since it happened, but I don't have any lit candles, but I want to have a candlelight vigil for Full Field Read darling, Lil Jordan Humphrey. He's gone. He's not on the roster anymore. He will never be forgotten. Hopefully he finds his way back to Sean Payton, but it was rough. It was rough.
Sean Payton pulled like the girlfriend meme where he's looking at Pat Bryant over his shoulder, but then little Jordan Humphrey's like, dude, what the fuck? Like, you've got me. No, I feel the exact same way where I'm excited to get this. It's so funny too, because like, it's not a bit. I genuinely think like little Jordan Humphrey, and this might sound mean, is like the perfect 5th, 6th, or practice squad receiver on your football team. And again, that's not me trying to be mean. You need those guys on a football team. Oh my God. I just saw a mean comment from Josh. Anyways, when I was reposting little Jordan Humphrey clips as soon as he went down, I had Giants fans being like, this is the receiver we need. And I wanted to be like, okay, this is exactly how it happens. Everybody's going to be, thinking, oh man, we got like a real talented piece that's going to have 500 receiving yards. Probably not. But he will have like 200 yards for you, and he's going to block his ass up. And I think we've talked about it too. It's hilarious watching the Giants seemingly flub everything. But the past couple of years, they took Chris Manhertz and little Jordan Humphrey, who I'm like, fuck. Who in the Giants scouting department is watching Full Field Read? And they're like, this guy is actually pretty solid. I think our run game is going to get a little bit better. It was nice of the Bucs to not be playing. The Nuggets are going to lose tomorrow. I hope we lose all the viewers because of that. Nuggets are dropping a Game 7. James Harden's dropping 38-8, and we're going to watch the Y shoot 75%. I can't wait for it. But, yeah, Frankie's film, I'm over on Twitter as well. I've been trying to get my clip game going a lot harder as this kind of last push has happened. I can't lie. The last few weeks leading up to the draft, I was over watching college football film. I can't deal with it. These guys at least are going to be on Denver, so I get excited. But my God, it took me like a week to actually watch Pat Bryant just because I can't do it, man. I can't watch these quarterbacks. I can't watch these defensive schemes. It hurts my brain too much. So I'm a baby. I can't wait for NFL football to be back, the true greatest product on earth. And yeah. Thank you guys all for tuning in. We went through an hour 5 tonight, which was fantastic. Oh, the palate cleanse is here, Josh. I have been just drinking the juice of the golden gods. I don't know what that was. That was a random line. That sounded bad a little bit too. But I have been, just absorbing as much as I can. And it's so funny going back and rewatching stuff for probably the 7th time and still trying to be like, oh my God, I don't remember that happening. But yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. This has been Full Field Read. You guys have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks for spending your Friday night with us. Go Bo Nix. Always on.